For this project, I wanted to start with inspiration from my summer project. I wasn't ready to be done with the idea of this telephone pole evoking so much anger within me about the situation of my isolation. The idea that this wonky wire controlled all the communication of the building across from me. It forced me to confront the concept that there were people in my situation, living within my vision, that were coping and communicating while I couldn't. When I made it into a pattern, I was highlighting the idea that it wasn't just the building that I could see from my window, it was everyone using them for communication and connection. That notion was massive and suffocating. From here, I wanted to focus on other things that made me feel this way. My frustration comes out when my insomnia flares. When I cannot sleep, I listen to the tick of my clock and the noises out of my window, and I let them drive me crazy. I listen to the clock and I wait for the seconds to tick by for the alarm to ring and for me to start another day. I created this collage as part of the exercises set by my teaching. Here I laid medicine packaging and leaflets with receipts, delivery labels, and packaging for makeup and birth control. The information in my life at this moment was crowded with my health panics as well as my self-destructive behaviour and my issues with self-identity that I needed to sort through. This intricate collage brought out how my low mood affected me to buy things like makeup. Then I started juggling with the idea of self-image and began painting versions of self-portraits on my mirror. The information we see through mirrors is so tinted with the unreliable perspective that the narrative is skewed. There is this idea that if we walk past ourselves on the street, we wouldn't recognise us at all, or that we look at different versions of ourselves in mirrors and selfies, that if the image was reversed to what everyone else sees, we would not be familiar with it. I then did this painting with lipstick, as the makeup industry is rife with exploiting self-image to sell products. In the collage earlier, it was evident that I felt this in effect firsthand. The capitalist regime is set up to allow companies to reinforce these ideas to make a profit. The portrait is very visceral and unflattering to demonstrate the harshness of a simple lipstick. I've always appreciated lipstick as an expressive use of colour, so I layered several lipsticks in many different strokes to evoke this. These are the works of Iranian artist Salman Khosrow. These paintings on the right are from his series White on White, where he makes these almost sculptural pieces with paint in a loose and featureless way, only hinting masterfully at the detail. Khosrow said that he hoped to capture a human spark with minimal intervention, which I would like to emulate in my work. He also creates larger works, digital art, and these incredible raw, unspun wall portraits. His work discusses self-identity as well as human identity in a way that resonates with me and my project. This is when I moved into these featureless, more abstract portraits that honed on a distilled colour palette. They create a messy and emotion-filled sense of self that I enjoy. I was able to evoke myself and my feelings towards the information of my reflection using Khosrow's method of inducing personality and emotion in small or controlled strokes. In this piece, I was able to layer the paint with the lipstick into one image on the mirror, enabling me to tie both together. Ultimately, for these portraits, I completely blocked out the mirror to prevent the narrative of self-image and destruction from further infecting my mind, a solution to these ideas of self-image. This feeds into the idea that the outside information is less important than the internal information. These are the works of Nalini Malani, a celebrated Indian artist who uses her work to make impactful political and social commentary. She discusses issues of gender as well as culture. She has been working with text, poetry and digital art. Her recent exhibition at Whitechapel Gallery was my inspiration for the mythology for a lot of this work. She discusses the ideas of race and identity in a very overwhelming way. She exhibited her work by projecting the works in a confined room with intense noises and readings of the poems written through each of the illustrations. Each series of photos had different stories and vocals. They meshed together in a consuming way. The previous ideas involving the white colour palette and blocking evolved into these white portraits I did with acrylic and thickener to create a shape and blocking with texture rather than colour, remembering the processes of Khosrow. These portraits are washed out in photo, but under shadowed lighting, they can come to life. The journey away from colour leads me to the idea of washed away identity. I feel like my colour is fading for me as I'm away from home, family, community. My culture used to play a big role in my daily life with the people around me as well as with my intimate family. Simple things like not having Cypriot food or being able to speak Greek at home has made me feel less connected with my heritage. Even when I was in this Cypriot community within London, I felt a disconnect to my ancestry as the Cypriots are invaded and colonised by the British. meaning there's a conflict in myself about identity, as long as I am technically a part of this country, being born here and working here. I've always felt a biased slew of information from many angles of my identity. The conflict of my cultural identity runs deep with propaganda and biased information from all the different angles. I've been increasingly seeking out Cypriot art, history and poetry to fill this disconnect. This poem by Turkish Cypriot poet Neseh Yassin highlighted a lot of my feelings about my country as well as my personal identity. I wrote it in English on one portrait and in Greek on the other portrait to highlight my duality of my identity. Visually, this led me back to a piece of work I'd made much earlier this year on my shower. The work was about self-value and discussing my recent issues with my sexuality. At this time I was very unstable with everything about my identity. I felt self-inflicted violence in my life, forcing me into ideas of what I should be with others. On reflection, this is similar to how I distilled my culture in front of certain people and discussed in the previous works. I realise here that I have been painting many images onto surfaces that can be seen through. While in lockdown, I've been obsessively looking through my window to observe. I had painted these funny little words and drawings and thought nothing of it. After I connected that this is what I've been doing at the beginning of the project when I was consumed with that antenna that you still see in these pictures. Once again, I began experimenting with text and portraits on the surface. I was thinking about who I am in this community, in this city, in this world. I see myself as alone, not in a sad or lonely way, but in the idea that I'm one being with the sole responsibility for my action, my culture, history, and thoughts and identities. All these information about me led me to this one singular unit that is me.